test. Are we too loud? Are we okay? All right. Okay, today is June 4th, 2024. We're at 6:36 p.m. At the GPICA membership meeting. And I thank you all for coming and joining us here and online. Today I wanted to announce we have a new board member. I would like to welcome Chris Bloom. And if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself, I would appreciate it. Yeah, I usually.
Okay. Well, good evening. My name is Chris Bloom. I live in Bokeelia and have been here since May of 1991. I first time coming here, just obviously, like most of us, just fell in love with the tranquility, the peacefulness, the aura of just having a laid-back lifestyle, and knowing what the GPICA has done for many years and is continuing to do, I felt compelled to put my name forward to participate on the board, and was welcomed, and thank you so much, and look forward to being a part of wherever we're going next, and for all the good and for the community.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay, so tonight's agenda is available up front here as soon as we get the system rolling. Thank you very much. As we introduced Chris, and tonight's agenda is pretty short, but we have a very important guest, Steve Evans. He's with SCCF. James? Sorry. See? Hey. Okay, so we're currently also looking for additional board members. We have Chris, and we thank her for appearing and joining with us. We have a board member maximum of 11. We'd like to fill some of the empty vacant positions. If anyone is available to join us and fill in a vacancy, I would greatly appreciate it, and keep GPICA rolling. As soon as we can build our board up, we'll be definitely taking on some additional projects, but we need the volunteer base to be able to do that. Okay, now.
Thanks. Hopefully everybody can see this. So this is for the month of May. I do the reports every month at month end. Essentially the beginning balance at the bank as of the end of April, so that would have been April 30th, is $3,233.95. This is in our checking account, and we'll get to, money market and so forth. We run $103 in cash in the box there. We had no meeting last month, so we had no income, no membership, people joining membership. And we wrote one check out, which was to the church here for rental of the facility. So our balance basically went from $32,33.95 to $31,33.95. The $103, so our checking account and cash on hand is $3,236.95. And then I sort of summarize our assets here one more time. So $103 in cash, $3,133.95 in the checking account. We have about let's just say 16.8 in the money market account at this stage of the game. And we also have a certificate of deposit right now at a 4.95%. It's going to mature in just a little less than a month at this stage of the game for a little over $78,000. I would point out that at our last meeting, and this is when Mike and I were kind of changing over, we got a question from somebody sitting in the front row, don't know their name, but they asked what we were being paid on a money market account. And I said I didn't know, but that I would check, and I went. And of course, as you know, if you know, you're dealing with the bank, we were getting 0.01%. So I went to the bank and said, in today's rate environment, that's not going to cut it. And they managed to move our money market account up to 3.5%. So, you know, on that kind of balance, that's, you know, it's $300 or $400 on an annual basis. So that was, one, a good question, and two, a little bit of exploratory work to get that moving. And the board has talked about, and I'm in the process of eventually we're going to take some of this money out of the money market account, and we're going to add additional CDs to the portfolio at 3.5%. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you know, for every $1,000 more that we put in a certificate of deposit, we'd get about 5%. So big jump from 0.01 to 3.5, and now the opportunity to jump from 3.5% to almost 5% on, like I said, on each $1,000. I think we've decided that we're probably going to leave $6,000 in the money market plus the checking account and the cash on hand, around $10,000 that's very liquid, and then we'll tie up another $10,000 plus that $78,500 in certificates of deposit. I'm going to try and set them up so that they roll on kind of a laddered basis. So if we ever need the cash for something, you know, we'll have a CD maturing. And then just the final thing, as we know, we went through the whole Chiquita Lock thing, and maybe Sue, you could give us an update on. If there, let me finish, and then, yeah, you can compose yourself. But at any rate, at one point, the board agreed that we would match up to $5,000 of donations that were made by the membership. What is left now of that $5,000, so in essence, $3,975 was given. We matched and sent it on to the Chiquita Lock. There is still $2,025 that could be given by the general membership for the Chiquita Lock, and so that identifies our responsibility too, which is we would have to match that $2,025. So that's still available. At some point in time, that was approved by the membership, and so once the Chiquita Lock issue is settled, we may come back and actually just close this out, but that will be a membership vote in order to do that. But from the previous approval, there is still the ability for the membership to give $2,025 to the Chiquita Lock fight, argument, whatever you want to call it. And the responsibility of the board of the GPICA is to match every dollar that comes in up to $2,025 to forward it on to the Chiquita Lock. So just so that's out there and everybody understands that. So, Sue?
There was, the latest update was the end of May. And there were some procedural filings having to do with the length of the brief presented by the objectors to the Chiquita Lock removal. That was resolved. The other comment is that about the beginning of May, there was a statement that the judge should rule within about 30 days, but that was a flexible deadline, and the judge has not ruled yet. So it's coming, it's imminent, but not yet.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Real quick, I forgot to go over the approving. You guys are getting a preview. The minutes of our April meeting. Hopefully everybody was able to go online. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to move to approval. I have a second. Thank you for all the seconds. I appreciate. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. Before we get to our Adopt a Road, I would like to see if Sue could give us an update or information regarding a petition.
Yeah, I want to thank Deb for allowing us to talk about this. So this is a petition for the right to clean water in Florida. It's a petition to get a constitutional amendment to the preamble of the Florida Constitution on the ballot. This one is for 2026. You may have seen one in the last year and a half. We were not able to get enough petition signatures. We needed almost 1 million. But if anybody would like to sign this, you just have to be a voter in Florida, a registered voter. And it really just gives everyone in Florida a fundamental right to clean and healthy water. And the gist of it is it's really to hold our government agencies accountable for enforcing current law. So it's nothing, there's no new laws, it's just enforcing really current law and giving the people who live here a little more power to do so. So there's a summary of the amendment on the top. I can pass these around. Maybe I'll do that.
So,
If anybody's interested, we do have the petitions here available with pins, of course.
so am I right that we cannot sue the state of Florida over this, and that this constitutional amendment would give us the right to actually sue for clean water?
Yes, it essentially allows us to, if there's an action taken where a citizen or an entity believes that the local government, be it state or local jurisdiction, isn't enforcing permits in the current law, it gives anybody who lives in Florida, actually anybody anywhere, standing in court to be able to file suit and make the government do,
And that's
do their
not
job.
possible now, right?
No,
Right.
not as
So
it stands.
that's the whole point of
Yes.
this, is that by signing this and getting the 1 million signatures or whatever it is that we need, we finally have the right, with some teeth, to
Right.
begin trying to enforce.
Right.
And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
If you're on the water at all, you know what our waters are like, and we really, I think we all think that there are things being done that aren't being done properly, and ultimately we need to have some teeth to be able to go in and to get them to do what they're really, what they're assigned to do.
Yeah, right. Right.
Just do what you said you were going to do.
Yeah, it's really
and
just doing their job, but
Yeah.
Special interests have a certain amount of
sway.
power, really, and this really gives some power to the people. So,
Okay.
any other questions?
All right, thank you, Sue. Okay, so as you can see by our next slide, tomorrow we're doing our Adopt a Road, Greater Pine Island Civic Association. I want to say thank you to Elaine Ballard for coordinating this for us. If you would like to attend, it's at 9 a.m. We'll meet at the Bokeelia Post Office, and we go down one side and we come back. If we're able to do the full, it's actually a 2-mile stretch, and it's great exercise, and you get to feed the native bugs. So make sure you bring bug spray if that's something that you don't like to do. And then, yeah, we we have some gloves, but we don't have a lot of gloves. So if you have your own, please bring. Ah, yes. The safety vests, they're beautiful. They're yellow. They got the little stripes on it. You want to come fun, have some fun, and keep Pine Island beautiful, and try to um, do what we can. Okay, so before we come to our guest speaker, I want to please make sure that everybody's phone is on silence. Please also carry any private conversations outside. That way our speaker will be able to be heard. If when it comes to questions, please make sure you step over to the microphone. That way those who are watching online will be able to ask or be able to hear your questions. Otherwise, the guest speaker will be answering questions, but they may not be able to hear the question. Okay. I would like to say thank you to James Evans.
Appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. I'm James Evans. I'm the CEO of the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. Before I forget, because I often forget, that I brought some brochures and things with me. Over here, you're going to find some information about SCCF. I've got some decals, SCCF decals, as well as some information on a new economic study that was just published by Green Economics that was sponsored by SCCF, Captains for Clean Water, and the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. And also, the Calusa Waterkeeper helped greatly in the production of that economic study. So take a copy of that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight. But just before I dive into the presentation, I want to tell you just a little bit about me and my background. So I've been working on natural resource issues in Southwest Florida since about around '97. I began my work as a biologist in the Caloosahatchee River, working with the South Florida Water Management District, doing research on oysters and seagrasses and water quality in the Caloosahatchee pretty much from the Franklin Lock and Dam all the way down into Shell Point and out into Pine Island Sound and San Carlos Bay. In 2000, January of 2000, I went over to Sanibel and began working with the city's Natural Resources Department, where I worked my way up from a conservation biologist all the way up to the director of natural resources. I was there for 21 years before I moved over to the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, where I led their environmental policy program. A couple of years ago, I became the CEO of the organization. And so excited to work there. It's a great organization. We have, a little over 40 employees working on natural resource-based issues from our marine lab to, habitat management, and I'll go into that in just a minute. All right, so our mission at SCCF, and how many of you know about SCCF? Everybody in the room familiar with SCCF a little bit? Some of you. Okay, great. So our mission is to protect and care for our Southwest Florida's coastal resources, and we do that through a number of different ways. But we began our organization in 1967. It was founded out of the need to protect the unique natural resources of Sanibel and Captiva Islands. And today we own and manage over 2,100 acres of land, not only on Sanibel, although we don't own any land on Captiva for various reasons, but we do own a number of the islands in Pine Island Sound, like York Island. We just acquired the McKeever Keys last year. We have another number of Patterson Island, a number of other islands, that we own and manage, as well as a piece of land in Cape Coral adjacent to the Chiquita Lock, fortunately, because we were one of the parties to that suit. And so we own all of these lands. We manage those lands primarily for wildlife and wildlife habitat. And you can see the map up there of the distribution of the lands that we own. But we were founded as a land trust primarily. We've moved on to a number of different areas. We own and manage the land, so we have wildlife habitat management who goes out there and does prescribed burns and manages the landscape. We have our coastal wildlife program who do sea turtle and shorebird monitoring and research, as well as we have a native landscapes and garden center where we're growing native plants and distributing those native plants so people can learn that native plants are good for your landscape. It reduces the amount of fertilizer and water, plus it's good habitat for wildlife. And it shouldn't just be on the conservation lands where we have habitat for wildlife. We also do environmental education. A couple of years ago, we acquired what's called the Sanibel Sea School, and our goal there is to educate our youth, and our mission is to improve the ocean's future one person at a time, and we do that through educating our youth about the ocean and stewardship. We also have our adult education and other education programs. But one of the most important things that we do is marine research and monitoring. We have a marine lab that operates out of Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge at Tarpon Bay. They're out in the water doing research on harmful algal blooms like red tide, blue-green algae. They're out there monitoring our seagrass beds, our oysters, and other things out there, as well as fisheries. And then we've got a couple other programs that I want to tell you about that are really important. Our environmental policy and advocacy program works a lot on Everglades restoration, the Chiquita Lock, and other issues that we're engaged in. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Captiva land use issues tonight, and our membership in the Protect Captiva Coalition, where we're fighting the county on a harmful development there at South Seas Island Resort. And then finally, our Coastal Watch program, and that's a program that you could get involved in and really get involved hands-on. That's the volunteer arm of the organization where we're out there planting mangroves on islands. We've planted Hemp Key, a number of other, islands within Pine Island Sound to try and bring back that habitat. We also put out oyster reefs. We have 20 acres of oyster reefs that are permitted, and we've put out about 5 acres of oyster reef. So if you put down the shell, the spat settles on it, the larvae settle on it, and the oysters grow, and it's productive habitat, great for, fisheries. So we're doing that type of work as well. So if you're interested, at the end of my presentation, I have a slide that shows how you can connect with SCCF and sign up for our action alerts and actually volunteer with our Coastal Watch program. So SCCF is a leader in water quality. We work with a lot of our partners in the region, including the Calusa Waterkeeper, Captains for Clean Water. We work with the Everglades Foundation, which is located more in the central portion of the state, in South Florida, as well as the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. Those are the groups that we really work hand in hand with to make sure that we're protecting our water quality. And what SCCF does is practical science. We don't do science so that it can sit on a shelf somewhere in some university and can be used for somebody's graduate thesis. It's science that actually applies to management and policy decisions. We don't do science if it can't be used to make a management and policy decision. So that's really important to note. And so some of the work that we've done is based on the River, Estuary, and Coastal Observing Network, which is a network of real-time water quality monitoring sensors that we have throughout the estuary, Caloosahatchee Estuary, into Pine Island Sound, and out into the Gulf of Mexico. We also have 2 freshwater sensors, one at Moorhaven and one over by the Caloosahatchee Regional Park, that allows us in real time to know what's going on. So we can monitor the salinity, the salt content in the water. We can look at the chlorophyll, the amount of algae biomass in the water. We can look at colored dissolved organic matter, which is that dark water that comes out of Lake Okeechobee in our watershed that blankets those seagrass beds with that dark water. So this sensor array allows us to monitor that in real time, and then we can take all of that data, working with the University of Florida Center for Coastal Solutions, you can come up with these really complicated models to forecast and project what's going to happen in the future. And that's been a really important tool that we've used to publish a number of papers on red tide and looking at the relationship between runoff and red tide, blue-green algae and red tide, and things like that. But I'll also note that these sensors, if you're a fisherman, you can go to these sensors and figure out what's going on with the tides, with the salinity, with the dissolved oxygen, which of course fish need oxygen in the water to be able to breathe. These sensors are really helpful for, if you're a fisherman out there, you can use those to target, areas that have the best water quality. And then I'll just wrap this slide up with the fact that we used these sensors to look at the storm surge as Hurricane Ian was coming in. And you can see those graphs on the right-hand side of that slide there. That shows the wave buoy that we had that rose almost 7 meters. So figure over 21 feet of wave height that we had near Redfish Pass from that storm surge when it came through. And you can also see the surge that went up the river, and you can see almost 2 meters of storm surge that went up the river. So, you know, it's a great tool. We used it to kind of predict what was going to happen with the storm, and it was great. Although we lost a number of sensors, we've been able to replace those since the storm. We're also working on trying to figure out, you know, why these harmful algal blooms occur. You know about the blue-green algae blooms that occurred in the Cape Coral canals, as well as when the water was discharged out of Lake Okeechobee. It had high volumes, high concentrations of what's called Microcystis aeruginosa. That's a blue-green algae that produces toxins. And this is a freshwater algae, so once it got into the salty portion of the estuary, those cells lysed or broke up, and then all of those nutrients that were bound up in those cells were released out into the estuary. And what we know happened in 2018, raise your hand if you were here in 2018. All right, good, almost all of you. 2018 was one of the worst red tide years we've ever had in the history of Southwest Florida. We had a 26-foot whale shark that washed up on the beaches of Sanibel. We picked up over 425 tons of dead marine life. And what we found was, through some of the research that we've been doing with the University of Florida Center for Coastal Solutions, is that when this algae came down from the river, it blanketed the canals and caused all kinds of other issues. Those nutrients had to be taken up by something. And that something was Corynea brevis, which is the organism that forms red tide. Red tide bloomed almost immediately when those releases came down. And that's why we so carefully and closely watch Lake Okeechobee and the blue-green algae concentrations within Lake Okeechobee, because they can contribute, along with all of the other nutrients that come off of our lawns and landscapes and septic and everything else, can contribute to red tide, and we've been able to prove that. And so we not only look at these blooms, you know, while they're occurring, but we also want to figure out how these bloom events evolve, just like I talked about, how they can be transferred from one type of algae to another. And so there was a paper that was published in 2022 by Miles Medina and some of our researchers at the Marine Lab that made these conclusions that these nutrients were being taken up by red tide. And these are nutrients that were coming off of the landscape and going out into the coastal waters. What we've been told, and what a lot of the research focused on in years past, was that red tide is a naturally occurring organism. We completely agree with that. It is a naturally occurring organism. It was here before the Spanish arrived, and it's going to be here well after we're gone. But what the state of Florida and many of the other researchers didn't agree was that that Corynea brevis took up all of these nutrients that come from the landscape and it actually exacerbated those blooms. What we know today is that Corynea brevis, the red tide organism, is not a picky eater. It will eat any nutrients that are produced, including dead fish that are decomposing, nutrients that break down from other algae, or nutrients that come off of your lawns and landscapes. So we know that now, and that's because we have these really complex models that allowed us to take huge data sets and crunch them and figure out what's actually going on. Now the state of Florida and other researchers agree with this hypothesis that the nutrients that come off the landscape are contributing. We all knew it, but it took the science to be able to, you know, make them, again, make a management decision and do something different than the status quo. We're also doing research on sea turtles and shorebirds and other things that are really good sentinels for red tide blooms and other harmful algal blooms. What we're finding in the sea turtle research that we're doing is that the red tide organism is actually being consumed by the adult, and it's passed on through the eggs of the into the hatchlings as they go back out to sea. We don't know if this is a competitive disadvantage or a competitive advantage, but we're doing the research to figure out what's going on. But what we do know is that red tide is being passed on to these different organisms, whether they consume them prior to birth or not. Same thing with shorebirds. Shorebirds are actually getting the red tide as it's elevated through the food chain. You know, the phytoplankton eat the red tide. The crabs eat the phytoplankton. The fish eat the crabs, and all the way up the food chain, and it gets magnified. So by the time it actually gets to the bird, it's in a toxic form where, you know, we're not even seeing red tide out there, but we're still seeing birds stumbling on the beach with brevetoxicosis and dying on the beaches right now as we speak, even though we don't see red tide along our shores right now. And so we monitor the habitats because they're really good indicators of ecosystem health. Any of you that are fishermen understand the importance of a seagrass bed and an oyster reef when it comes to our fisheries. If we have poor water quality, we have poor seagrass beds, we have poor oysters, and we have poor fisheries. And that's something that we're monitoring and we're very concerned about because we're continuing to see these declines in the seagrass beds throughout Pine Island Sound, Matlacha Pass, and into the Ding-Darling National Wildlife Refuge. So that's something that we're monitoring very closely. And so, of course, you know the importance of seagrass beds. We have about 6 different species in Florida, many of which occur here in Pine Island Sound. They provide great, food sources for manatees, sea turtles, as well as, a lot of the fish spend at least a portion of their lives in seagrass beds, mangroves as well, but, seagrasses are really important. They also act as a baffle to the turbidity. So if you have, turbid water as it moves through a seagrass bed, you'll see that dirty water filter out. If you don't have a seagrass bed, that water continues to be turbid and dark. And of course, it helps with providing oxygen to the fish and other invertebrates and things that live in the sound and other places. So seagrasses are really important. And some of the threats to seagrasses include, red tide and other algae blooms. How many of you are familiar with a type of algae called Caulerpa fastigiata, which is a clumping grass? It's green and it's blanketing most of Pine Island Sound and a good portion of Matlacha Pass. You're seeing that as well. So our researchers have been out there recently, and it's all over the place, and it's really changing the landscape of the estuary. And so we're trying to figure out, what can be done about it, but more than likely it's just nutrients. We have all of these nutrients that are coming into the system at various times throughout the year, and that algae has a competitive advantage because it takes the nutrients from the water column instead of from the soil where our seagrasses take their nutrients from. But boats, of course, the dredging and prop scars, and of course, a warming climate is also having an effect with water temperatures, increasing and sea levels, rising, regardless of the cause. It's contributing to the losses of these different habitats. They will adapt, of course, over time, but we are seeing some losses, especially with some of these species being at the southern extreme of their water temperatures. So we're going to start to see those species migrating to the north, just like we've seen snook all the way up in the Swanee and into Texas now, where historically they never ranged out of Florida. So we're seeing those changes occurring. The seagrasses in Ding-Darling, are declining. You can see this, downward trend in the data set from 2010 all the way to 2022. And what's important to note here is that anytime we have an episode, like a high discharge event from Lake Okeechobee to the Caloosahatchee, or we have an El Nino event like we saw in 2016 or this past year, we see a pretty rapid decline in abundance of seagrasses in the beds when we're looking at the shoot counts and things like that. So it's just important to note that, we're seeing that throughout Ding-Darling. It's not just in Pine Island. It's not just in Matlacha, where we've had a lot of hydrological changes. We are seeing that throughout Charlotte Harbor as well. The image on the left-hand side, there is that Caulerpa fastigiata. That's that blanketing macroalgae that's causing a problem. And then on the right, you can see the oysters with some overgrowth of algae on them. We started a study in 2024 to really do much more of a comprehensive analysis of what's going on in Pine Island Sound as well as San Carlos Bay to figure out what's going on with this algae, and we've got a number of grants to help us study that. And I want to shift gears a little bit and just tell you a little bit about how you can track some of the water quality conditions on our website. We've been putting out what we call the weekly Caloosahatchee Conditions Report since 2011. It was started by Rayanne Wessel, who is the policy director for SECF before I came on board, and I worked with her on this report. We initiated this in 2011 when I was at the city of Sanibel. And this is a great way to document the conditions. We put it out every week in partnership with Lee County, City of Sanibel, Cape Coral, and Town of Fort Myers Beach. We're able to document all the conditions, water quality, algae abundance, anything else that's going on. So we have a weekly snapshot going back all the way to 2011. So if you want to figure out what's going on in May, the first week in May of 2015, you can go on our website and check that out. It might be interesting to you, but it also provides us data for when we have to file a lawsuit on the Chiquita Lock or something like that to make a case for what's going on, the changing conditions that are leading to these problems. On the right-hand side of that image, that slide, you'll see what's called the Caloosahatchee Water Conditions Tracker. That was an infographic that we put together several years ago to really tell the story in a very simple way. It's more geared toward the layperson, where the report on the left is geared towards water managers. We send that to the Water Management District and the Army Corps of Engineers every week, and our policymakers also read those reports. But the one on the right is really a great way for you to take a look at that and say, okay, what's going on with Lake Okeechobee? You can see from this image that Lake Okeechobee's, in this image it was just above 13 feet, and you can see that the algal bloom status for the Caloosahatchee, we're in the kind of green yellow range. We're not seeing any little bit of blue green algae, but nothing too bad. But anyway, this will give you a really good snapshot where you can track those, and you can sign up for those, and they'll be in your mailbox, your email box weekly. We also started a way to monitor the water quality visually through what we call our aerial water quality monitoring site. So you can go to the website. Every week we put out a drone image that's taken at Lighthouse Beach Park on Sanibel. And a picture is worth 1,000 words because you can really tell a lot by what's going on visually here. The Chamber of Commerce's and others are starting to use these images to make a case for when we have to object to water releases. And this is what it looked like just a couple of weeks ago with about 2,000 cubic feet per second coming from the Franklin Lock and Dam. That's what it looked like in October. So, and that's with 5,000 cubic feet per second coming out of Lake Okeechobee, the watershed, and into the Caloosahatchee. So, if that's not a compelling argument for needing to address the water management issues in the Caloosahatchee, I don't know what is. But we've been using this very successfully. Also want to shift gears again and just talk a little bit about an economic study that we just completed this past year. We completed it in December. This was a partnership with the Captains for Clean Water and the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. We shared the cost to hire an economic firm out of the west coast of the United States called Green Economics. They went and assessed all of the economic impacts associated with water quality in Charlotte, Lee, and Collier counties. No one else had done this in the past, but we figured the only way we're going to be able to get our policymakers to understand and listen to us is if we tie it to the economics of the area. They certainly listen to people when they want to develop and when they want to harm the environment. We wanted to figure out if we could come up with data that supports protection of the environment. In this case, you can see that based on another event similar to what happened in 2018, the red tide bloom in 2018, lost property values can equate to $17.8 billion. Again, this is Lee, Charlotte, and Collier counties. A loss of 43,000 jobs. A lost coastal economic output, which includes our boat manufacturers and people being on the water. All of that associated industries, $5.2 billion. $8.1 billion for lost outdoor recreational activities, going to the beaches and doing all of that, type of outdoor activities. And in lost property tax revenue to the three counties, $60.3 million. So those are huge numbers, big economic impacts. And I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about this study, there is a flyer here. You can also go to our website and download the entire report. It's a pretty lengthy report, but a lot of really good data. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing on Captiva. So we are part of what's called the Protect Captiva Coalition. As many of you probably know, it was a year ago in January when Lee County started working on some updates to the Land Development Code to make it consistent with the rest of the plan. Of course, that was shortly after Hurricane Ian devastated our shores. So they were busy right after Hurricane Ian, working on proposals to amend the comp plan to allow more development and density on Captiva Island at South Seas Island Resort. Nobody on Captiva wanted to increase heights on Captiva. In fact, they opposed it. They wanted to maintain 28 feet above the FEMA flood elevation. But the county, pushed forward and said this is a county-initiated issue. They wanted to amend the Land Development Code to make it consistent. Well, I'll say more about that, but I want to show you this video that we put together as part of the Protect Captiva Coalition, which is really led by the Captiva Civic Association in partnership with SECF, the City of Sanibel, and a number of other folks that are supporting this. We had over 13,000 people on the islands and in the region sign a petition opposing the Land Development Code changes, yet Lee County moved forward and they completely disregarded the community and what our wishes were so that they can approve these plans. So I'm going to show you a 6-minute video and then I'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
What draws a person to Captiva? It's a sense of community, and it's living within and being a part of nature rather than overpowering it.
The charm of Captiva is like no other in the state of Florida. We get a particular type of visitor that comes to Captiva. They want that low-density tropical island feel.
We have low density, low height buildings on the islands that maintain the natural character where the buildings are tucked in within the natural environment. Wildlife, is allowed to flourish because over 70% of the entire island of Sanibel is protected for conservation.
Out of nowhere, last summer we found that Lee County, on its own, without any consultation with us, was trying to make very significant changes in our land use policy, which is what started the whole controversy.
When the county commission reviewed the plan, they argued, no concern with density. We're making these changes to make it consistent with the Lee County codes.
Here's what you see: small, quaint island life, all of which is under threat of change. A proposal to allow higher buildings on Captiva is sparking some outrage.
This action that does not increase density.
I'm certainly against this.
Change is tough. I believe we're treating everyone equal.
So it's not really about density.
And that change is a challenge, and it's uncomfortable.
So is it correct to say that at the end of the day, this will still read enforce, at the very end of Goal 23, it will still read, and enforce development standards that maintain the historic low-density residential development pattern of Captiva?
All of that remains the same. The density for South Seas is still going to be at 1 to 3 units per acre. The Captiva density is 3 units per acre. Nothing's changing with that. The hotel cap on Captiva remains the same. That has not been changed.
When the plan came out from South Seas, it proposed 707 units, up from the 247 units that they were allowed under the current plan of 3 units per acre. That is almost 3 times the density that they have today.
The state actually said that this was done under the false flag of resiliency, that it was really a proposal to increase density, and they got it right 100%.
Our island's very different than, say, Fort Myers Beach. We have really focused on protecting the natural environment instead of focusing on the developed environment, the human-made environment, which increases runoff, which increases impacts to water quality in our coastal environments. We really focused on preserving those natural areas, really embracing this idea that less is more.
Sanibel has been one huge success as a community, a local government community, for, since '74. And it's not because of any one person or any one thing. It's because it's a community that wants it that way.
Our Captiva plan, our vision of what Captiva is supposed to be today and over the long term has always in the past been well accepted by Lee County up until this recent point in time.
The owners are shocked by the changes to the Land Development Code because it increases density by a standard not ever seen before on Captiva.
We've been operating here at Twin Waters Inn for 48 years here on the island and been growing the business over the years. We're very protective of what we have here. We have manatees that show up every morning on the shore here on the bay side. We have the dolphins that come in and out. We want South Seas to be a good partner in the community, and we want them to develop to what was agreed upon.
If the zoning is approved for South Seas Island Resort, the impacts are not only going to affect the environment, they're going to affect every way of life on Captiva as we know it today, whether it's utilities, public safety, road congestion.
There is one road in and one road off when you come to Sanibel and Captiva. And that one road in takes you all the way to the tip of Captiva to South Seas Island Resort. And that one road takes you off the island.
It's the only hurricane evacuation route. In the event of an emergency, and we need to get people off the island quickly and safely, that's going to be a huge impact. When you rebuild and grossly increase density and the number of units in a project under the guise of resiliency, that's wrong.
Protect Captiva is a coalition of businesses, residents, tourists, and organizations on both Captiva and Sanibel who immediately came together to oppose this proposal because they are very concerned and afraid about what the island will end up looking like should it go through. We could not and did not get the results that we thought we would at the Board of County Commissioners, so we have now filed an initial lawsuit, and we're looking at a lot of other legal options that are open to us in order to protect this island. We know it's a long road, but we will be there every step of the way to preserve the island that we all know and love. The Protect Captiva Coalition invites you to join us. You can contact your county commissioner and tell them that you are opposed to these changes. You can donate directly on our website. Our goal is clear. We've said it from the beginning. We want to maintain Captiva as it is, and we want more people to come and help us do that.
All right, so that in a nutshell is what's going on Captiva. Is it working? Oh, okay, just making sure. Okay, perfect, sorry, my ears are weird. So that's in a nutshell what's going on Captiva. We did file a couple of, now I can hear it now, but it's kind of weird. Oh, you're adjusting it? Oh, okay, sorry. I thought I was going crazy. I know it's been a long day, but not that long. So we, filed the initial lawsuit. It went to the, the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce decided that they didn't want to pursue, going after the county. So we filed a lawsuit on the 28th of May. So that's going to go before an administrative law judge the last 2 weeks in July is when it's scheduled. We also filed a separate challenge based on the agreement. You saw in the video that there was a reference to 912 units. Well, there was an agreement that was signed between the county and the Captiva Civic Association in the early 2000s that essentially codified the agreement that the county and the Mariner group at the time, or Mariner, who developed South Seas Island Resort for the cluster development, that it's a binding agreement. So we've taken it to the circuit court, and we should know here very soon whether or not that 912 units is going to be enforced and that it's a binding agreement. If it is, then it ends there. If it doesn't, then we're going to continue to move forward with the administrative law judge, challenging the inconsistencies between the comprehensive land use plan and the land development code. Because when they amended the plan, there's still inconsistencies with the code. So, we feel pretty confident with our challenges. We feel that the law is on our side, and we have a pretty significant war chest to back us up. So, we're going to continue to take this as far as we can. But this is exactly what our representatives at the county should not be doing. And we're seeing it not only on Captiva, but we're seeing it in other places, and we're very concerned. I'm getting calls from folks on Upper Captiva that are concerned with the same issues going on with rezoning and looking at higher density development, even on North Captiva. So I don't know if that's happening here. I don't know enough about your land use issues, but it's certainly a concern. Because any opportunity that I think that the county sees to increase tax base, they're probably going to take advantage of that. Whether it's mangrove wetlands or it's an upland hardwood hammock, it doesn't seem to concern them, and we're going to continue to fight that. So we have a pretty good coalition. If you guys need any help with land use issues, we've got, our policy director is an attorney. We also work with some very good attorneys. If you want to just talk about land use issues, let us know. But we've been able to beat back a couple of big issues. One was over in Shell Point called Eden Oak, which it was anything but Eden, where they wanted to develop that property there in the mangroves. And it was right before Hurricane Ian. And if those mangroves weren't there, the communities in Shell Point would have been devastated. So anyway, those are the issues that we're working on. But I want to let you know that if you want to learn more about the work that we're doing, you can connect with us by going to our website. You can see, you can get SECF in your inbox, which will allow you to get our e-news and things like that, keep you up to date on all the things I just talked about. And you can sign up for our action alerts. If we do an action alert, whether it's on Protect Captiva or it's on the legislative session, water quality issues, we fully endorse the right to clean water. So we do regularly put out information along with our partners on the right to clean water as well. So I'd encourage you to sign that petition because it's a really good cause. But with that, I will answer any questions you have. I do have a few other slides if you're interested in the current water quality conditions from Lake Okeechobee down, but I was told 20 minutes and I know I've already gone above that, so. Questions?
Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please come up to the microphones so those online will be able to hear the question. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Leo Amos. Dealt a little bit with the fire district. What we're finding out is your missing link is the fire district. The people that are getting their information is through the fire district. Okay? There was a woman, Sarah Spector, who's an attorney, has been working with the fire districts on increasing height and density. So if you look at your fire district, because that's the people that they're talking to, the county, about adjusting all this. And the fire districts are beefing up their fire department. They're planning on buying equipment that can handle taller buildings as well as density. And they're enjoying it because the fire district gets to grow. So that's where it's Sarah Spector.
That's
Okay.
very interesting. I know Sarah works with Rosalind Andrus, was on the other side of us on the Eden Oak issue. So, yeah, thanks for letting me know. That's important information.
It's in some of the Mountain State Pine Island Park.
Okay.
We had a meeting over there. Yeah, that.
Yeah, because this is important stuff.
Well, I mean, if you want to go back through it, you could probably go back through the fire district, Matlacha Pine Island Fire Control District, and go through the minutes for the last 6 months, I believe, or maybe even longer. And you'll find that there's information in there about doing things with the county through Sarah Spector. And I think she was doing both sides. I think she was working the fire district and also representing some of the people that wanted this, wanted higher districts, higher buildings. Yeah, there's some big fights on that. Matter of fact, our fire district, if anybody's interested, if anybody's really interested in helping our community, 4 of the fire commissioner seats is up for election. Okay? If you want to do something for your community, just qualify for one of the fire commissioner seats and get these people off there. They're not doing very good. They fired the deputy chief without cause, fired him without cause. Sarah Spector was part of this group. Fired him without cause and paid out of our tax money for Pine Island and Matlacha $720,000 of our tax money to pay it off. And this just happened last year. And this is all done in hush-hush meetings, which was illegal. Okay, we've been there, done that.
We're going to go ahead and keep it on topic at the moment. Thank you.
Well,
I know. There's some.
They want to do something about
How did Commissioner Ruane vote on this?
He voted against it. He did.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions about the waters around Pine Island. We're trying to get some funding to do some exploratory work on some projects that potentially could help with water quality. But what we found is when we get to the level of the county, they tell us, well, the Matlacha Pass and Pine Island Sound are not part of an FDEP or Florida Department of Environmental Protection region that is regulated, a BMAP.
Oh, they're not, right, they don't have a TMDL.
Right.
Total maximum daily load, which is the load assigned to a water body, and then the basin management action plan is the.
So my question is, what thoughts do you have about what we can do about that in terms of getting qualified to improve the water quality?
Yeah, so I'd have to look at the BMAPs, but I do know we have a BMAP for the Tidal Caloosahatchee, which goes down, into right before Matlacha
Right.
Pass. But Matlacha Pass is part of the aquatic preserve.
Yes.
So it should be exceeding water quality standards, exceeding in a good way, not exceeding in a poor way. And we know that the changes that have occurred in the North Spreader have contributed to those. And, it's impaired now. I mean, there's
Right.
nutrient
Both
impairments.
the water bodies are
Yeah,
impaired.
and parts of Pine Island are now impaired as well,
Right.
all the way up to Captiva.
Right.
So I'm not really understanding. I'd have to do a little bit of research to figure out what would prevent you from doing water projects. Now, are you talking about trying to hold the property owners within the watershed accountable, or are you trying to do restoration projects within the sound?
I
or
think
within
we're
the
pretty much talking about getting funding for some infrastructure improvements
Okay.
on the island. And when we go
Septic to central sewer
that's one
conversions?
example,
Okay.
yeah. And we're just trying to get some money to get started, and we're being told, well, you're really low priority because you're not in this basin management action plan.
Right. So they do prioritize water bodies based on whether or not they have a TMDL and a basin management action plan. So once you have that, then you go to the priority list. Although there's so many water bodies that are impaired with BMAPs now that it's hard to prioritize them because they're all a priority, and they're all competing for the same funding. But there was a lot of funding that came through from Hurricane Ian for central sewer or for septic to central sewer conversion. So I would talk to your commissioner about that and see if, they're certainly allocating money to all kinds of different places in Lee County to encourage development and, all kinds of housing projects and things like that. Why don't we fix the water quality problems that occur now before, they get worse into the future? That would be my recommendation, is start with your commissioner and say, how can we get some of that money to be able to, do these conversions? Because that's the easiest way. With sea level rise, what's happening is you don't have enough separation between the groundwater and your leach field, and so what's happening is you're having nutrients and bacteria that are going down into the coastal waters. We're seeing that on Captiva today. So I think you can make a case for it, and the commissioner, at least your local commissioner should be advocating for that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
My name is Chris Welzek. So where does the project stand for South Seas right now? Was that a planned use development they were trying to adjust, or have they been issued permits, or what?
Yeah, so they have applied for, a rezoning of the property to go from they had 247 units based on 3 units per acre of density for their hotel rooms. They're trying to take it to 707 units, which would blow that 912 units total development out of the water. So they went to the county. They've already put in 3 applications. They've been rejected twice. They're still reviewing the last application. But again, they'll probably send them another long laundry list of requests for additional information.
Yeah.
Because they're not, the traffic impacts they're not accounting for. They're not accounting for the reduction in density based on wetlands versus uplands. They're trying to reduce the amount of parking spaces they need, because otherwise there's no space on the property to be able to have all of the parking that they need for all of those units. So there's a whole bunch of issues, but the county staff, I will say, they are being, vigilant and are going through the plan and seeing all the inconsistencies with the plan and rejecting it and sending it back to South Seas. But we'll see what happens when push comes to shove and the commissioners get involved and start, putting political pressure on the staff. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's possible. It has in the past, but we'll see what happens. So I think we just have to wait and see. But our attorney, every time they do another new application, we are going through, their entire application and sending comments to the county, and then the county's reviewing that and then rejecting their plan and pushing it back.
Understood. And then switching to the discharges at Lake O, the Frog Pond project and all this stuff going on, I guess what's your opinion, or what kind of impact do you think this is going to have? Is it another Band-Aid, cause another problems? Just You're obviously more involved, so.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some, obviously there's 68 projects in the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. There are some projects that are going to help. I mean, the bottom line is we need storage. If you don't have enough water to store the water that's coming in from Lake Okeechobee or coming in from the north into Lake Okeechobee, and being able to send that south into the Everglades and into Florida Bay, you're going to have to send it east and west, which is where it goes, and the Caloosahatchee gets the lion's share of the water. So we've been a big advocate of the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir because it's the largest reservoir in the entire system. It stores 240,000 acre-feet of water, which is about roughly a third of the size of Lake Okeechobee. It allows us to treat that water and send it into the Everglades instead of sending it to the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie. So there's some projects that are much smaller in scale, but they have their purposes. Some are water quality projects, some are water quantity projects. Some are affecting the timing and distribution of those flows to different parts of the system. So I've been a big advocate of those projects south of the lake to move that water south into the Everglades where it's needed. Some of the projects north of the lake are also good, especially those bigger reservoirs. Not the deep well injection. That stores about 8 cubic feet per second into wells. If we're getting 10,000 cubic feet per second into the Caloosahatchee, a well that holds 8 cubic feet per second isn't going to do much for those high volume discharges, especially at $10 million a well. So you got to look at the cost benefit of all of these different projects, but dollar for dollar, I think the reservoir that we have in the Caloosahatchee Basin, that's going to help us get those freshwater releases that we need during the dry season. And then projects like the EAA reservoir allow us to, reduce those damaging discharges and send them south. So they all are going to work. It's just a matter of how the state and the federal government prioritizes them. Water supply has a big voice, and I say water supply, it's mostly sugar. They have a really strong voice, and so they're going to get the projects that they want or need first, which is okay. I mean, we want to support the farmers, but it can't be at the expense of the Everglades, and it can't be at the expense of our coastal estuaries and our coastal communities. So we just want equity is what we want. So. Any other questions?
Steve Eldridge. James, I think it was 4 or 5 months ago, we had a couple of water echo guys come in, and they were talking about trying to form a coalition of people. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of trying to bring so many parties together. I understand, Captains for Clean Water and some of the others, but like our organization, how could we plug in? How could Matlacha Civic Association? How could St. James Civic Association? There's so many of them, but we don't know where to connect.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do it is to make sure that you're following reputable organizations. The ones that I've mentioned are all doing good work, and they all have their kind of niche. We are probably the leaders when it comes to science. We have the resources to be able to do that science. We own a lot of land and manage a lot of land. The other groups don't do that as much. Conservancy of Southwest Florida is doing a lot of research down in Collier County and up into southern Lee County. But I think what you need to do is just, sign up for the action alerts, and, as the information comes through, then you can take action. As I mentioned, we support a lot of initiatives that are, being conducted by other organizations that aren't SCCF. The Right to Clean Water is a great initiative. The Captains for Clean Water are powerful advocates and have a really good relationship with Governor DeSantis, where some of the other groups don't. So I think we just need to make sure that we're all working together, and many of us do. We collaborate a lot. In fact, this study is an example of the collaboration that we do. I don't look at us as competitors or telling you different things. We should all be on the same page saying the same thing. And for the most part, we are. So I think just, sign up for the action alerts, know what's going on in Tallahassee, because that's where a lot of things happen every legislative session. There are a lot of harmful bills that come through that preempt our local governments, like the city of Sanibel, like the town of Fort Myers Beach, and other local governments that are trying to do the right thing, but they can't because Tallahassee is telling them that they can't because they want to restrict whether they can have a fertilizer ordinance or what kind of plants they can plant, whether they're native or exotic. And that's because Tallahassee has no problem telling the local governments what to do, but they sure as heck hate the federal government telling them what to do. So we have to have, again, it's about equity. You know, we should let the citizens, the best form of government is the one that's closest to the people, right? And the local government should be able to speak on your behalf and not be preempted by our legislature. So I think it's important just to take action when you can, follow the science. You should know when, fiction from fact. And I think that when we have these land use issues, we should all come together. So if there's anything we can do to help you stave off development or deal with land use issues, we don't oppose all development. There's good development. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for development, right? But there is development that is irresponsible and impacts our way of life, our quality of life, in our economy, and we need to stand up against that.
Robert Ballard. My concern, I was a proponent for getting septic systems taken out and getting a whole sewer system in here. But as I learn more about it, I get nervous that we're only just pushing it off to some. We're probably better off with septic systems than we are, because the 4 or 5 treatment places that we have around Lee County, they take the effluent after it's supposedly come to a decent level, they dump it in the Caloosahatchee River, or they dump it somewhere else. And it's not to the level that it should be, and nobody in the government agency is jumping on that to try to bring it down to a lower source before it gets dumped into. And of course, if you have a storm or flood, they just open the gates because they can't handle it. And it all goes into the river and bays. So I think we have to think twice, think through it deeply before we start pushing for a complete septic system all over the place. I think it has its place, but my understanding, if your septic system is put in the right place at the right distance, the flow from the discharge system to the soil and everything will be treated much better than what is getting dumped from the sewer systems.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So you're absolutely right. There are the modernized septic systems that are perched up higher above the water table. Those function and operate, excellent. In fact, if you're discharging water from a wastewater treatment plant into the rivers and estuaries, and then when you have a storm and it's discharging off the landscape, then that's a bigger problem. That doesn't mean when a storm comes that it's not going to infiltrate the septic, and that's going to be a problem too. But you're right. If the wastewater treatment plants are not treating to what's called advanced wastewater treatment standards, meaning that it's bringing the nitrogen and phosphorus and the dissolve, there's solids and things like that down to a certain level, then it's not really beneficial. In fact, for a long time, the wastewater treatment plants in Fort Myers were dumping directly into the Caloosahatchee, and the load coming from that, I actually in the early 2000s quantified that load, taking the concentration times the volume of water going into the river. It was huge. And so now what they're going to do is they're going to do this interconnect with Cape Coral, and they're going to send it over to Cape Coral, which just means that now you're going to take reuse water and combine it with the fertilizer that they put on the landscape and then dump it in the canals, which is going to end up out here anyway. So I agree with you. The reuse water has its place, especially if you can replace potable water that's being used for irrigation with reuse water, if it's treated to advanced wastewater treatment standards. And I can tell you, we did a study on Sanibel when I was the director of natural resources, and I was working with SCCF as a consultant. They were working for us, but I wasn't with SCCF. They did a groundwater study and a surface water study throughout the entire island, putting wells in, looking at the gradients between the reuse ponds that the city had and the wastewater treatment plant, and the discharge from the golf courses onto the golf course, and the freshwater bodies, the open bodies of water, and then the groundwater. The biggest polluter that we found on the island was reuse water. And so what that data did was allowed the city to make a case for being able to invest over $21 million in upgrading their wastewater treatment plant from a tertiary treatment plant to advanced wastewater treatment. It cut the nitrogen by 50% and the phosphorus by 70%. So that's a huge load when you calculate that over the entire year. So something that should have been an asset became a liability. And so that's why science is so important and the data is so important to be able to figure out what's going on. So anyway, thank you for that question.
I have a question that carries on to that one. The deep water injection wells, because a lot of the septics, not septics, the sewer system folks are just treating it and putting it in there. Have you seen a connection between the deep water injection wells and the pollutions in the estuaries?
So because it goes into what's called the boulder zone, so it goes down, well below our drinking water aquifers and things like that into what's called the boulder zone. What we do know is that the boulder zone has to discharge somewhere, and there's been hypotheses that have been put forward that suggest that it comes out in submarine groundwater discharge offshore. And I think there could probably be a case to be made, but the problem is the time it takes for that water to get from the well all the way out to that discharge point, it's hard to track it. So right now, we haven't been able to, I don't think we have the technology, and the science hasn't caught up yet to be able to track that, but they've put tracers in those wells and they've tried to follow them, but you don't know if it's going to come out in a well here or somewhere in the Florida Keys or wherever it might be. So it's difficult to track, but I think many of the scientists, including me, think that it's not just out of sight, out of mind. If you're putting that in a deep well, it's probably going somewhere. And the question is it going offshore or it's now available to red tide or some other harmful algal bloom? We don't know. So good question though.
Does anybody else have a question? Well, I appreciate your time
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Teaching us. Nadine, are you able to bring up the last slide? Thank you. Okay. So at this time, I'm asking if you meeting adjourned. Anybody? I always forget. Yes, there. Motion on the floor. Second. Thank you very much. Oh, it's a question. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Come on.
My question is about the Yucatan restaurant and parking on Little Pine Island. Has the Pine Island Civic Association talked to anybody about that? And I'm just sort of wondering.
I could definitely tell you when they first put their, I tried to get this stopped way back in the day, when they first put their plan forward of adding additional tables, where they were going to do with their seating, and they weren't interested and the county didn't listen. And that was well over 2 years ago prior to the Ian. So it was a development that had been in place for quite a long time. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what we can do at this point because the county has already approved the plan and approved the additional seats.
Well, the question is the parking on Little Pine Island?
Right. They reduced their parking greatly when they redid their restaurant on both sides. And the county allowed them to do that because they said they were going to make sure that it was not public parking, it was going to be valets that were going to park it. So therefore they were able to use a larger chunk to get the number that they needed for the seats. That's really, yes. Yeah.
What I've learned.
Yes,
just
please.
because it's very concerning to me as well. So I started with the sheriff, the deputy, and I said, is the sheriff Carmine, is he aware of all of this? Yes, he's aware, but his hands are tied because there's nothing to enforce at the present time because the parking signs are not there for them to enforce no parking. All it says is no parking on the pavement, if you look at the signs there. So it's now gotten down to FDOT, which is where we should probably go to next, is to say they need to put up some signs, no parking in this area at all, then the sheriff can enforce it. But it's all this, going like this, pointing to the other one. But that's what I learned, just because of my concern of there's an accident going to happen there.
Yeah, that's good information. Thank you.
How would we
believe through their website. It's and
Have a contact. I don't know that it's the right one, but he's working on getting me the right person as well to put forth, our concerns. And, first then they say, well, those are just employees parking there. Well, it doesn't matter who's parking there. And I know it's not just employees, because coming through there, I saw a young woman with a baby in a stroller walking along there. It's like, it's so dangerous. But that's where it's at. Nobody wants to upset the restaurant owner for some reason. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Mike, can you come to the microphone?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I think that there is a Lois Overholser or Julia Overholser that puts out a blurb from FDOT, and I believe that she might be a person that you would want to approach first, since she's the one letting you know what's going to be happening each week. I don't know her name, but I can send it to you, Debbie, when I go back home and check my email, if you like. And I can send it to Frank too.
I believe we've actually contacted her,
Oh, okay.
and it's not part of her job. Her job description is for the construction through Matt Lachey and her updates. So unfortunately, she can't help us with that one. Yes, they do. Yeah, the question. Also commissioners.
I think it's probably safe to say that the GPICA board will further work on this issue, and then when we have action items that members can take, we'll put that out through email, because we think this is going to be a bigger issue also as the additional construction takes place on the Little Pine Island Bridge. And as season hits, I mean, we all know what it looks like during season, especially since Hurricane Ian, with the limited access and the construction going on. So I think it's safe to say we'll keep talking about this, and we'll try to help find a way to resolve this so there's equity for all parties. How about that?
Very good. Any additional questions? So I can look forward to seeing you all here tomorrow morning, right, at 9 a.m.? Not here. Well, not here. Thank you.
I will see you tomorrow morning.
Yes. At the for the community cleanup. So next week, next month, we have Code Enforcement William Diaz coming to talk to us. I believe Nadine. Nadine. Okay. No, the discussion is going to be particular or anything just regarding?
Just general code enforcement issues. They're probably not going to be able to address specific properties. But so you can talk about how code enforcement works and what they do on a day-to-day and what to do, for instance, if you have a nuisance property in your neighborhood. So.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the floor? Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? Unanimous decision, and thank you very much, and hope to see you guys next month